So we've listed our domain, which is our X values. We listed our range, which is our Y values. All right, and we are done with part A and number 11. Okay, that's simple. Just get used to using these little squiggly brackets when you're listing your domain and range. All right, now here's the part where we have to kind of think a little bit about these problems. We're going to make a rule. So I want to describe what a rule is before we make it, okay? So it says in part B, we want to make a rule. A rule, what they're saying is simply this. We're going to write an equation. Okay? So anytime you are asked to make a rule out of a table, make a rule out of a graph, what they're really asking you is, can you write an equation for that table or graph? Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take this table, and based on what we see on this table, we are going to write an equation for it. Okay? So I'm going to give you a template to follow. Anytime you want to write an equation or write a rule, this is how you start the rule off. You always want to look for the variable that represents your Y value. Okay? This is your dependent variable. So if you look, my output has a variable of Y. So because it has a variable of Y, that's how I want to start my rule. I want to start my rule with Y. Okay? After you figure out your dependent variable, which is your output variable, you put an equal sign. Your dependent variable, your output variable, will always be by itself when you're writing a rule. Okay? Now we have our equal sign. On the right side of the equal sign is where we put our input variable or our independent variable. So I'm going to write in my independent variable, which in this case, if you look, it's an X value. Okay? What you want to notice though is I left some room around here because we're going to do some math in here and we need a little bit of room to work. Okay? So this is how you start every rule when you are asked to write a rule. So to sum it up, when I write a rule or write an equation, my dependent variable goes first, then the equal sign, and then my independent variable goes after. Okay? So my output variable, equal sign, input variable. Again, these variables could change, but for now we're using X and Y because that's what it says in our table. All right? So now this is the rule. How do we write rules? To write a rule, you got to use these tools. You can use addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. For now, these are the only tools we have to write a rule. Okay? So let's go ahead and try to write a rule. This is how we're going to do it. Let's look at the table. So what we want to figure out is, looking at our first input, in this case, our first input is 1. Using our tools over here, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, I want to ask myself, what can I do to 1? Can I add, subtract, multiply, or divide something so that it can give me my output of 5? So off the top of my head, the first thing I think of is I can add 4. If I add 4 to my input, my 1, it should equal 5. Okay? So right now, the rule I have is adding 4. Okay? So let's check if this rule works for all of my inputs and outputs. Okay? So we know it works for the first one because 1 plus 4 is 5. Now I'm going to try my second input. With the same rule, you can't change the rule from one to the other. It has to be the same rule for all of them. So let's try this. 2 plus 4. Does that give me the correct output? Okay? And that answer is no. That means the rule of adding 4 this is a bad rule. It didn't work because it didn't work for all of them. So that means I gotta create another rule. So using my tools over here for writing rules, I need to figure out what can I add, subtract, multiply, or divide this guy by to get 5, okay? So right off the bat, I know I'm probably not gonna subtract something because that doesn't make logical sense. So I can't subtract something. I'm gonna try multiplication here. So what I'm gonna try is I wanna multiply by 5. Because when I multiply the input by 5, 1 times 5, it gives me the correct output. So this one works so far. I got to test it for the other ones. So my rule I think that's going to work is multiplying by 5. So 2 times 5, does it give me my output? Yes, it does. So let's try it for the next one. It has to work for all domains, all x's. 3 times 5, does it give me the correct output? Yes, it does. And then lastly, let's test the last one. 4 times 5, does it give me the correct output? And it does. So my rule that I wrote up here, multiplying by 5, works for all of my x values and y values. I have just discovered or wrote the rule or the equation. So that means I now am going to put the rule into my equation here. So what am I doing to my x's? I am multiplying each x by 5. So guess what I'm going to do to this x in my equation? I'm going to multiply this x by 5 because that's the rule I came up with. And this would be the correct rule for this input-output table. Okay? And this is how you write the rules. Let's go through it. All right, so domain and range should be fairly simple. Your domain should look something like this. 10, 14, 18, 22. 10, 14, 18, 22. And your range is just the y values. 3, 7, 11, 15. Okay, so domain and range are there. Now we're going to write our rule. So let's first check. When we write our rule, our equation, we always want the output variable first. So our output variable is y. Then the equal sign. And then after the equal sign, on the right side, we want our input variable, which is x. But I'm going to leave some room because we're going to add a rule to it. Okay, so now let's try to figure out the rule. So I like to put the rule on top of my table here. So I'm going to ask myself, looking at the first x value, what do I use? Adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm going to be subtracting 7. 10 minus 7, that gives me the correct y value. So we're good there. I'm going to try the same exact rule for the next x value. 14 minus 7, that gives me the correct y value. We're good there. Same rule here. 18 minus 7, this one works. And last but not least, 22 minus 7, and that also gives me the correct y value. So the rule of -7 is actually the rule that's going to make my equation true. So I'm subtracting 7 from all my x's. So that means I'm going to take my x in my equation and subtract 7 from it, and that is my rule for part B. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you a few more minutes for 13 and 14, and this is what we're going to do. We are going to have, I'm going to pick 2 of you for each problem. So 2 people are going to do 13, 2 people are going to do 14, and then I'm going to ask you to share your answer, okay? So be prepared. I'll give you about 2 more minutes. Yes, because you're subtracting 7 from x. So x minus 7 would be the correct way. All right, so 13 and 14, I'll choose 2 for each. Good luck, don't get nervous. Remember, if you get it wrong, you suck. I'm kidding, you don't suck. Not yet. Okay, guys, this is how it's going to work. For 13 and 14, I'm going to pick 2 people right now for 13. When I pick those 2 people, what you're going to do is in a private chat to me in the chat room, send me a private chat telling me your answer. For example, if in number 13 you think the rule is subtracting 15, so in the private chat you would say subtract 15 or minus 15. Okay? So all your answers are going to come in the chat. You could do it, please do it privately unless you want everybody to see your answer. Okay? So for 13, the 2 people that I'm choosing to do number 13, let's see. We'll go Audrey and Gina. Okay, Audrey and Gina, number 13, please give me the private chat rule for number 13. Was that Mortal?
You haven't chosen someone for number 14?
No, nobody yet. All right. Gina, Audrey, appreciate your answers. Okay, so right now none of you can see their answers and you're not going to see their answers. I just want to see if they're alive because I couldn't see their faces. So they already submitted their answers, and now I'm going to do number 13 for you, okay? I'm not going to do part A. I just want to do the part B on number 13. So here we go. So I want to make the rule, so I start off with y equals, and then my independent variable is x. So if you look, the rule I believe that will work so far is going to be adding 6. Okay, so I want to check, does adding 6 work for all of these? Okay, so negative 6 plus 6, 0, it works. Negative 4 plus 6, positive 2, that's good. Negative 2 plus 6, positive 4, that works. 0 plus 6 is 6, that works. So my rule of adding 6 is a good rule, so I'm going to add 6 to my x. Okay, so adding 6 should be the correct rule for B, and that should be your equation. All right, number 14. The next 2 victims for number 14. Let's go with Eric and Natalie. Eric M, Natalie M. Please give me the rule in a private message for number 14. Cool. Eric and Natalie turned in their answer. Now let's go through it for number 14. Okay, number 14. When I first looked at this for the rule, I thought it was going to be plus 8. Okay, plus 8 works for the first set of numbers, but it does not work for any of these. So that means that's a bad rule. So the actual correct rule is multiplying by 2. And if you multiply all of these by 2, it gives you the correct output. Okay, so that means I have my dependent variable equal to my independent variable, and the rule that we're doing to the x's is multiplying by 2. So the rule is 2 times x. Okay, cool. Sorry, that was too fast. All right, we good here for 11 through 14? Nobody has any questions on that? Good to go? That's probably the hardest part of this whole section here. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next 2 problems. I'm actually going to do number 7 for you. Okay. So in number 7 here, all we're going to do in number 7 is using they gave us the rule, okay? Using our rule, we want to make an input, our domain, and output range table, okay? And what they give you is your domain. So remember, these are your x values or your input. So I'm going to list them in my x table. Okay, so they tell you what your x's are, and now to figure out my output or my y values, I'm going to take each x and plug it into my rule. All right, so here's my rule or my equation. So it's y equals negative x plus 2. Mardell, tell your brother to be quiet. All right, so what we're going to do here is this. This is my x. I'm going to plug it into my x value in the equation. So I get y equals negative 5. Notice how I plugged in with parentheses, plus 2. And now we simply do this math. Negative 5, which is really negative 1 times negative 5. That gives me positive 5 plus 2. And if we do the math correctly, that's a 7. So my output for negative 5 is 7. Okay? And now we're going to do the same process over for the next x. So instead of plugging negative 5, I'm now plugging in negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 3, that's positive 3. Bring down the positive 2. And that gives me 5. So that goes here. And then we repeat the process again. So now I'm going to plug in 0. Negative 0 or 0 plus 2 is 2. That goes there. And then we have one more to plug in, which is 2. So when we plug in 2, -2 plus 2, that actually gives me 0. And I am done completing the table. Okay, that's what you're going to do for number 8. Okay, so again, add these problems to the assignment for Wednesday. These are the extra problems for Wednesday. I'm now going to give you the access code. And I'll come back to this, but I'll give you the access code to check in. Please check in so I can mark you here. If you don't check in, I mark you absent. So the access code for today is desk. All right, so before you leave today, you are free to go if you are done with number 8. I'll go back to it in a little bit. But before you leave, log into your Canvas and check in period 3 with the access code desk. DESK. Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay, and that's number 8. Once you're done with number 8, I'm going to stay on here until about 1:30ish. So if you need extra help or anything, if you finish with number 8, please work on the calendar stuff for the rest of the period. So unless you need help, you are dismissed after number 8 is complete. No, I'm going to have you do it, and you're going to add it to the assignment.
Mr. Fernandez,
Yes, boss?
I have a question. For the homework for today, I had a head start yesterday, and if an input goes into 2 outputs, is it still a function?
No, so it's not. So see how I have my inputs here? They only could go to only one output. Okay, so for example, -5, the only thing -5 goes to is 7.
Okay.
Okay,